So, want to kick off ancillary revenue, everybody. Really excited to talk about this because it's a real big piece of what we do here at Evernest. But first of all, I want to do some quick introductions. I realized that we'd never done this and pitched Spencer on the idea of us introducing ourselves to anybody who's brand new. Hey, everybody, my name is Matthew Whitaker. I've clearly grown a beard since that picture was taken. And I am the founder and CEO here at Evernest. And I have got into this business. I've been in the SFR business for about 20 years now and been running this great organization of awesome people for about 13 years. Started about 13 years ago. And Spencer is a big part. If you hadn't heard our podcast on how we got started, Spencer is a huge part of getting started, mostly because he wimped out, got out of the business, and he gave me all of his rental homes to manage. I had a bunch of rental homes. Spencer had a bunch of rental homes that he gave me. He went and did some higher return work, and I got stuck building this business. Obviously, I drug Spencer back into it, but today Evernest manages somewhere around 14,000 homes. And we also have an HOA business, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the other businesses we have today. But we're in 34 different markets, 19 different states. And so one of the things that we like to talk about is how we grew our business, and we'll tell you, I've got a slide for that. So Spence, why don't you keep wanting to get further ahead?
Yeah.
So this is the first time I've done this.
Hey, everybody, Spencer Sutton, and I've been in the SFR business right around 20 years as well. And I got out in 2008 and handed Matthew my rentals after I had to go through an eviction here in Birmingham, Alabama. And I was like, that's the last time I'm going to go through that and placing my own tenant. So I gave rentals to Matthew and then joined in 2014. So this December will be 9 years that I've been trapped at Evernest, and been trying to get out for the past 9 years. I'm kidding.
You know,
I loved it.
What's interesting, I don't know that many people, and this may be a question for the group, did anybody like intentionally end up here? Did you grow up and say, I want to be a property manager? There may be some children of property managers, but did anybody intentionally get into property management? I haven't met too many of those. Accidental property managers, yeah.
No.
Okay.
Okay, there, Anita. There you go.
That's the only way I've ever heard of somebody intentionally getting in, is being a child of. We're going to roll through some quick announcements, and I promise you we'll get into some meat. Our next webinar is going to be November 6th. We're going to do
November 6th, or it says
second. Yeah, sorry, November 2nd. November 6th, I think, is, you hear that because that's usually when you vote. No, November 2nd. Remember, it's always the first Thursday of every month. We're going to cover this far off topic called property management. This is the first time we actually are going to cover how to property manage. So I think this would probably be we're going to bring on some of our best property managers. And I think this would probably be a great time to get some of your team members on to watch this. We're going to talk about some best practices when doing property management, dealing with clients, talk about how we think about different clients, talk about how we service those. And so I think it'll be very helpful, probably something that you'll want to have your whole team on. Second thing here is just to remember to sign up for our newsletter. McKenna's about to post that into the chat channel where you can sign that up. We have about 4,000 owners on our newsletter, so you don't want to miss some things that we're sending out. Spencer works really hard on that, which is really shocking that he can consistently send out a newsletter to me. And then our podcast, we're going to selfishly plug our podcast. We do have the Evernest Property Management Show. For those of you who have followed it for a long time, it used to be called 300 to 3000. We just redid it, put our mugs on the front of it. And so we're trying to do a little bit of a rebrand there. Spencer upgraded the music. Thank goodness that music was just not getting it done for me. And then the last question that everybody always wants to know, and we always cover, is why in the world do you do webinars? Why would you basically train your competition? The first thing is, it is truly our passion to develop people personally and professionally. It's fun for us. We do it internally. We talk about this a lot at Evernest, and we think about that development of our team members. To the extent we're able to develop them, the better Evernest becomes. We're just absolutely passionate about that. The second thing is it's like a rising tide raises all ships thing. This business is so in the early innings that we think that the better we can help the whole industry become more professionalized, we actually think that makes it easier for us to grow the business, bodes well for us. And so we want to help you professionalize the industry. And then the last thing is we also buy property management businesses. If you're interested in how we do that, we've actually done some webinars on that. You can look at those on our webinar page. But we think one day you'll be interested in selling your business. And we think that if we build enough trust with you, then we'll be one of the phone numbers that you pick up and call. And there is like a little bit of a selfish piece of this. All right, we are 10 minutes in. And Spencer, anything I forgot to cover before I hit what I call the flywheel?
No, I think you nailed it all. I'm about to launch.
I usually do.
Hey, tell me when you want me to launch the poll. We've got a poll that we wanted to do as well.
Okay. So let me set the stage here. This is not a slide that I've sent out or really ever showed publicly. We talk a lot about it internally, and what we talk about is our Evernest flywheel. The way we think about the business is a little bit different from other property managers. And what we don't want to be thought of as just a property manager. We want to be thought of more as a solution provider. And so how we think about the business, I'm going to start at the top of that flywheel. So first, we want to grow the business. As we talked about, we do that inorganically through acquisition, buying other property management companies. Spencer does a great job with our marketing, and we have a sales department that is selling property management agreements. And so the whole goal is to continue to grow the business. When we do that, we don't think about our organization just in the number of properties, although that's the way we say it publicly and externally. We also think of it in terms of the number of relationships we have. We have about 29,000 residents that live in our homes, and we have about 6,500 to 7,000 owners that make up the houses and small multifamily that we manage. When we do a good job of management, and that's that kind of next piece right there, execution, what that does is it builds client trust. So you can imagine if you do a great job of property management, you do a good job of leasing houses, communicating, executing, then those clients, those residents, and those owners are very interested in expanding that relationship with you. And so I think about this through the lens of Jeff Bezos all the time. So Jeff Bezos, when he started Amazon, he started with books. And what Jeff did such a great job of sending me books, fulfilling, executing, getting those books to my house in the time he promised me, that it was very easy for me to move from books to toys. And that was the next thing that they did, was they started sending toys in. Because he did so well with my books, it was very comfortable for him to deliver toys to me next. And then because he did toys so well, it was easy for him to do furniture. It was easy for him to do CDs, which was the next thing. And if you need to know what CDs are, Spencer can explain those to you. Then he kept like expanding on the things that Amazon would offer the customers. And today, all of us probably get 80% of everything we buy from Amazon, all the way. So now he's gone from books all the way to groceries. And now he's even trying some services. So point being is he took one relationship, built trust off that one relationship, and then was able to expand that. And what that does is it's very similar to what we're going to talk about here is, like, once you build trust, your owners want more things from you. Once Jeff built trust with me as a client or as a customer, then I wanted to expand my relationship with Jeff. And so if you think about it, like, there are things that your owners are buying that they want to buy from you, right? And they want to expand the relationship with you. And when you do that, what some people call it wallet share, some people call it lifetime value of a client, LTV. But the point is that one client becomes more valuable to you. And so if Jeff looked at me as I was buying $200 worth of books a year, today I probably spend $200 a day on Amazon. So I'm being a little facetious, but point being, I'm probably went from a $200 customer to, we buy most of our groceries there. So I dare say $12,000-$15,000 customer a year, maybe more. I'd probably be embarrassed to know how much it really is. And when we do that, he's asking for me to do that. And so we're going to talk about doing that here with your customers and with your residents once you build that trust. When you expand LTV, the great part of LTV expansion, which is why so many businesses are trying to do it, it's a very cheap way because you've already developed the relationship, you've already marketed, you've already paid Spencer's crazy salary to have that customer come in. So expanding on the relationship's way cheaper, if that makes sense. So you can also provide them a better deal because you're not having all the extra expenses that some of your competitors are. When we think about that when we make that extra money, we want to pour it back into how we hire and train talented team members. So it's really important for us to find A players and just pour that cash back to there. That builds capacity and allows us to continue to grow the organization. And then you can see how this virtuous flywheel can go. And as we go through that flywheel, this is a Jim Collins concept. As we go through that flywheel, the better and faster we go through, the faster Evernest faster Evernest will grow. That is the flywheel talk. Now, Spencer, anything you'd add to the flywheel? I should ask you that.
No, that was perfect.
Man, you're just like letting me have this whole thing. This has turned into somewhat of a Matthew Holtz class.
Can you talk for another 45 minutes, Matthew? That's what I want to know.
I can. I certainly can. All right, let's talk about what types of things people are buying, right? There's products and then there's services, okay? When we think about adding ancillary revenue, you think of like ancillary services and you think of ancillary products. So an ancillary product, which we'll talk about would be something that's generally tangible or is easy for you to provide that you don't have to like physically go provide. Perfect example of that would be some sort of resident benefit package to the resident, right? And that's like a product that you sell your resident. A service is something different. So when I think about a service, I think about maybe our maintenance business is an ancillary service. Our brokerage business is an ancillary service. And so those are two different things, right? One is something like a product you're selling. One is something you're doing for a customer or a client. And then you also have to look at this through the lens of the resident, and you have to look at it through the lens of the owner. And so there's different things, like residents have different needs than owners have needs. So when I think about life through a resident, what are things that residents are buying that they just as soon buy from Evernest as buy from somewhere else? And we're going to talk about how we think about that and some things that we started offering our residents. And then when I think about an owner, how can I expand my relationship with my owners? I think about an owner coming in and they're owning rental property. There's like things they're buying, like mortgages and insurance, and they're already buying them, and they would just as soon buy them from Evernest. Spence, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I go back when I think about this. I think back to the execution piece. To me, this really only works if you're executing and if you're providing a good service because you're building that trust. And so to Matthew's point, they just want to, it's so much easier to have everything done with one service provider. And, I just think that's obviously so very important to this whole thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked because I was coughing like crazy right there. And I didn't know how much longer I was going to be able to hold it on. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Everybody wants to, once you build trust with somebody, you want to buy more things from them. It just makes a lot of sense, and it's way easier to do that. Couldn't agree more.
Even if it's more expensive, even if it's a little bit more expensive, but you know that the quality and you know that it's going to be done right, it's worth it.
Yes. Perfect example is I don't know that I've actually looked at prices on Amazon of certain things, right? If I'm buying a very expensive thing, obviously I'm looking at prices, but I'm buying toothpaste. I really don't price shop. I just buy it because it's a convenience and I trust it.
Yep.
All right, let's talk a little bit about, and make sure you're getting your questions in here. We want to talk a little bit about it through the lens of a resident and some things, how we would think about ancillary revenue from a resident standpoint. The first one, which is a product I mentioned earlier, And perhaps the most easy thing, because they make it so easy. And I know there's a lot of people that'll put these together themselves, but we're big fans of Second Nature, and they use we use their resident benefit package. It's just a great way to get started expanding your relationship with your residents. And this is something that our resident benefit package today includes things like pest share and air filters and a tenant rewards program. And just a real easy product as step one if you want to think about expanding your relationship with your residents. The second thing I would think about is there is like a base case for how your resident relationship should be. And anytime a resident asks you to go outside of the normal processes of the kind of like property manager resident relationship, you certainly ought to ask them to pay you to do that. Because Robert Locke I grew up listening in this business, listening to him, and he always talked about how this was a nickel and dime business. And a lot of people say that in a negative way, but if you think about an organization like ours, you have to build it based on scale. And if you're doing a lot of extra things for your residents that they aren't paying for, then that's a big problem, because then that kind of like limits the amount of homes you can manage inside of your processes. So I threw up a couple of things that I would think about. We have all the time residents coming to us and saying, hey, I want to do a roommate swap. And that just takes like time. And so we have a fee for when somebody wants to do a roommate swap. So we have somebody from Evernest has to literally go through after underwriting the new residence application and create a new lease and do a whole bunch of things. And that's not something that we should have to do for a resident, and because it's outside of the scope of the services that we provide them. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked right there when the new question popped up. Another thing is renewals. We charge residents for renewals because there's obviously physical work that goes into that. And then notice posting. This is one that obviously landlord tenant law is state specific, but this is one, if I have to get you to pay your rent by posting a notice on your door, if that's what it takes to get you to pay your rent, that seems very silly to me. And I ought to charge you because I have to drive out there, or somebody has to drive out there and post a rent. And so that's another thing that we charge for. That's obviously a little bit more of a negative spin on that, but certainly want to make sure that you're charging for what you're doing.
Yeah.
Anything.
I was just thinking of pet fees. So we'll charge pet fees for logging that fee if they're going to have a pet. Obviously, the owner gets a vast majority of that pet fee, but we do retain a little bit of that for documentation and things like that.
Yep. Perfect. Next one is landscaping house cleaning. Think about this through the eyes of a resident. I live in a house and I'm already renting from Evernest. And frankly, we don't do this today, but as I'm thinking about like our pipeline here of what we're doing, it makes a lot of sense for us to provide services that benefit them for the house. And so the first two I could come up with were landscaping and house cleaning. If you had a relationship with a landscaper, which we obviously do when the houses are vacant, or you had a relationship with a house cleaner, which we obviously do when the houses are vacant, then it makes sense for us to basically broker those services out to our residents and because it makes it the easy button. And then maybe you can just pay the vendor and include it on their rent. There are services, call it cable. There's things that all houses that people are buying. And I want you to start thinking bigger and thinking more like a business owner than just a property manager. You're more than just a property manager. You're trying to solve problems, which is what most property managers do, and then make it easier for residents to live. And so landscaping and house cleaning would be something very simple to do. The fourth thing here is liability insurance. We require all of our residents to get liability insurance. And this is like in case they do something through some sort of negligence or screw something up and it burns down the house or something bad happens to the house. But why don't we offer that? Since it's required, why don't we give them an option to choose us or one of our partners to do that? And look, it is insurance, so you need to make sure that you're doing it in conjunction with state laws around insurance, but you want to make sure. But there is a way you can certainly make money by managing this program. And liability insurance is something that all residents are buying, and they frankly would rather hit the easy button and buy it from you. And then the last thing is security deposit alternative. Look, this is things around the financial services piece of the business. Security deposit alternative is just one thing. Maybe figuring out a way to help them pay maybe a little bit more money, but rent weekly or something. Like there's all sorts of ways. Again, make sure that you're abiding by any state landlord and tenant law. But a security deposit alternative just basically says there are plenty of programs out there that allow you to essentially collect a monthly fee instead of collecting the security deposit. And that's a good thing for the resident because it allows them to have that cash to move. It's like really expensive to move these days, and they're going to need cash for things like for getting their utilities turned on, their water, their power. They're going to need cash for furniture, for the extra room that they just rented. There's just all sorts of things they need cash for. And so if you provided a way for them to not have to give you some of their cash, then that's just a great way to do that. Spencer, I've talked a lot. I feel like I'm like owning this whole thing myself. I'm a little nervous that people are probably going to get tired of me. There's not a lot of back and forth.
No, why don't we answer some questions? There's not a lot of back and forth. You built the slides though, so you know them really well. You want to answer some questions?
Yeah, I think my point was I'm only paying you half price for this or this one.
My fee.
All right, let's do some questions. Yeah. Do you manage properties in Southern California? We do not manage properties in Southern California. Next one is many RVPs offer pest control. In my experience, we have always had owners handle pests, so this is a big transfer to residents. Who normally bears the cost, residents or owners? Great question, Tracy. The way I think about this is if a resident moves in and there are pest problems, and I don't know, you can like, is that 30 days? Is that 2 weeks? Is that 1 week? There's clearly like, we need to take care of that, right? However, my experience has been pests typically go where the people are. And my experience has been that the pests are usually as a result of the folks living in the house and that they should ultimately be responsible for it. I've never met a roach that if there wasn't food sitting out, that if a vacant house just doesn't, it does have roaches, I get it, but it's typically because the house was nasty before and it's because somebody had too much food or something sitting out. I guess at the end of the day, I think of this as definitely a resident thing. A house doesn't in and of itself have to have bugs. And yeah, it may be a switch for you. And look, there are times where we want to keep the resident happy. And even though we think it may be the resident's fault, that we'll take care of pest control.
Have you ever had any roach problems in any rental houses you've managed, Matthew, or owned?
The first house you sold me when you got me into this business had a horrible flea problem.
That's right.
And I'll tell you a horror story of pests there real quick. We bought a house one time and then put a resident in. I'm sorry, a resident moved out of the house. It was winter. And then a resident, we cleaned it. It looked great, put a resident in it. And then it got warm. So it went from cold to warm. And immediately it hatched a bunch of flea eggs just completely engulfed this poor person. And it was horrible. We had to get the house and
you had to bomb it. Did you have to put them up somewhere?
Yes. Yeah, we had to put them up somewhere. This was one of those things where it was clearly our fault. We didn't know. We did the best we could. But if you live in a cold environment and then it gets warm, for those fleas will basically lay dormant. Their eggs, it seems like they'll lay dormant until it gets warm and then all of a sudden they'll hatch.
We also have a bad problem in Birmingham in some places with German roaches. And those things are rough.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what they're saying too because they speak German and I don't speak German, but
it's horrible.
They're rough. Yeah, they're hard to get rid of.
Dad joke, everybody. Dad joke.
I thought it was a good one.
All right, what about Kurt? Kurt has a question here.
On resident fees for extra, do you include these fees and when they'll be applied in the rental agreement? Some of them, yes. But some of them, no. If they want me to do extra work, they're just going to pay me to do it. Perfect example is I think we actually do have it in our rental agreement, but I don't necessarily, if I have to go drive out there and post a notice on your door, I don't think I have to. Obviously, it's costing me gas and my time and me charging you something for me to do that, because that's not standard, that you is pretty reasonable. And so we do put some of these things in there. The roommate swap, we don't. It's hard to talk, it's hard to predict everything that's going to happen, but just have a good idea of how much your time is worth, and then just tell them, yeah, I'm happy to swap roommates, but that's going to cost you X number of dollars. On your liability insurance, do you offer the insurance through Second Nature? Great question. The answer is we did. And today we got to the point, Michael, where we are big enough that we basically started our own insurance company. This is like brand new. This is 5 days old. And we've been working on it a long time, but we literally just launched it. And so today we're actually offering that liability insurance through Evernest Insurance. Did you read this?
No, I didn't.
Go ahead.
Roaches are a thing, but I'm in the Northeast as to whether it gets colder, rodents move inside. Sometimes it's a function of the house, unless it's brand new and it's not usually a sealed box.
Yeah. Look, we manage in Columbus and Detroit, and so I'm sure those folks have experience with that as well.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next section.
Let's talk owners. What are owners buying? So perfect example of this would be an owner benefits package. You have a resident benefits package. What are some things that you could package up and sell to an owner that are like outside of your normal scope of services that an owner may or may not want? And when I put this in here, I had an idea of what a few items. Spencer, does anything immediately come to mind, or maybe somebody in the chat channel? But I've heard of owner benefit packages before.
Yeah, I'm thinking of extras like eviction protection plans, like rent guarantee plans you can add in, things like that. I'm thinking obviously things like gutter cleaning, any kind of other yard work that you can add.
Great job, Spencer. Yeah, that's why you're here, is to help me remember all these things. Fantastic job doing that. I'm back to paying you full price for this.
Thank you.
All right, so perfect example. Yes. What are some things that owners want to do? Cleaning the gutters. What are some things you can package up and sell to your owners?
Yeah, I thought just real quick, I remember, so one of the things that we did early on when I joined, probably in 2015, we sent out a survey to all of our owners. And in that survey, we were asking them, hey, what is your biggest concern when you think about owning rental property? And the two main things that came back to us were they're afraid of people not paying rent, and they're afraid of a house being trashed, and they're afraid of evictions. And so we were like, okay, now that we know this, we know that what people's main fears are, especially just the accidental landlord. What can we build that can help alleviate those fears and could be like an ancillary service, which is why we thought about eviction protection even way back then. And like even maintenance guarantees, and not maintenance guarantees, but we also had at one point, we had the eviction guarantee also covered part of a renovation. Like there was money for renovations. And the whole goal, like, kind of put a lot of pressure on us. We don't want people to go through evictions. Obviously, we don't. So we're going to do everything we can to put the right people in the property. And then even if some life circumstance happens, to remedy that without an eviction.
Great job. Thank you, Spencer. One of the first things we did, actually, one of the first things we did is the last thing on this, but the first things we did was start a brokerage business. Keep in mind, when you are helping your clients buy more and or sell their rental properties, you become less of a commodity business. So you don't want them just thinking, oh, I'm just paying this management fee every month and I'm just doing this. Like, you want them to think more holistically about the relationship. And so brokerage is a great way to help them see more value. What we found is that if I'm helping an owner buy more houses, they very rarely get super frustrated about the water heater costs $100 more than they thought it should be, or the resident being a day late is as big of a deal, right? Because you're providing more value and it's more of a holistic relationship, versus if the standard is all the residents pay all the rent and the house doesn't break, If that's the standard, then that's the standard of a property manager. And so you want to make sure that you're introducing more and more services. Not to mention the brokerage business can be a very high margin business. You can do this yourself because many of you are brokers, agents. And because you have that relationship with your owner, you can go out and help them buy more. But you can also hire this pretty reasonably, because one of the things real estate agents really want is leads. One of the things we have as property managers is leads. And so it's like a great way for us to make money. At one point, the margin on this brokerage business was just insane. And so again, make sure that, and look, heck, when they leave, like when you lose a house, if you help that owner sell that house, it's always nicer to leave with a big commission check versus them just walking out the door.
Yep.
I would also say, this is just a kind of an aside, I would be less scared about telling your owners about selling. I think when I first started growing up in the business, like the last thing you wanted to do was lose an owner. But I think owners are thinking about selling at all times anyways. And so you want to be part of that conversation. And so this is just some unsolicited advice, which is obviously why you log into a webinar anyways, but I would be less concerned about that. And I would make sure, if you think about it, if a house is worth, and I've seen a lot of property management agreements, $2,000 to $2,200 in annual revenue. And I don't know what margins are on that, but let's say somebody's margin on that's 33%. So quick math is that's $700 a year. And that client stays for 7 years. That's 700 times 7. That's $4,900. That's how much the client's worth. But if you go sell that house and you make a $5,000 commission, you basically just sped that cash up to the front. So I wouldn't be so scared of selling these homes.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Because you're in your mind, you're like, if I bring it up, it'll be the first time they thought about it. And what you're saying is they've already been thinking about it, especially coming around the turn. So you want to Matthew's point, you want to be in that conversation. Jesse mentioned something in the chat, but she just put it to the panelists. I think going back to the owner benefits package, pet guarantees. I've not ever heard of pet guarantees, but maybe you have, Matthew.
Yep. What I think she's probably talking about is just basically covering some sort of, in the event the pet tears up the house, yeah. I think that's what
I think the challenge is just determining exactly what that pet damage is exactly versus human damage. Some of it's very obvious, but some of it may not be as much.
Next thing is, if you are doing brokerage, and once you're doing that, you're starting to drive a lot of decisions around the buying and selling of houses. And so a couple of financial services that are tied really closely to that is mortgage and title. Now, look, I'm not expecting somebody to stand up a title company, but there are mortgage providers. There's all sorts of ways you can, maybe you get your mortgage license. I don't know how hard that is, but that way somebody can pay you a mortgage referral. I think the point is you need to open your mind to expanding on the relationship. And again, I don't know what's legal and what's not, but what we've thought about is there a way we can have a mortgage company one day and just essentially help our investors buy more houses by saying, not only will we be the broker, but we're also the mortgage company here. Much like offering insurance to residents, I've also thought about, and we haven't done this yet, but it's insurance to your owners. Evernest today is 14,000 or so homes. We go out and we go to the market and we say, hey, we're insuring these 14,000 homes. Is there any way you would give our clients a deal and we could get it cheaper? And then all of a sudden they're able to buy insurance cheaper. You want to talk about a way to keep a client a lot longer is by being able to help them buy things cheaper just because of their relationship with you. And when you do that, they don't think as much about your property management fee. And I actually have a vision one day that Evernest is going to essentially give so many discounts because they're on the platform that our property management fee is almost free. Not that we would have a zero property management fee, but it's almost free, right? Like you think about it through the eyes of insurance, you say, hey, if you were paying $3,000 a year and I can get you the same insurance for $2,500 a year, all of a sudden that's $500 of a management fee I've earned, and call it 4 or 5 months of a management fee. So I think that kind of speaks for itself. And then I don't know why I put it last, but one of the first things we did, which I highly suggest going back and listening to the last webinar because we covered standing up a maintenance business, but is look, we have toilets that are breaking. Our CFO likes to say, I don't know which toilet's gonna break today, but there's definitely the one that's gonna break today somewhere. So it's a highly reoccurring issue. And standing up a maintenance business. And a lot of people are very hesitant to this. I know there's been a lot of struggles out there to make money doing it, but it seems to me like if you have a very predictable income or inflow of work orders and you can't figure out how to make money with a maintenance business, that seems pretty silly to me.
Yeah, definitely go back and listen to that webinar. You can go watch it. We'll put a link in, or you can just go to the Evernest webinars page, evernest.co/webinars. You can see it there. We even talk about in that webinar, like how many properties do people typically have before they start a maintenance business. All right, Matthew, let's hit a couple of questions real quick.
Let's do it.
From Anita, Evernest Insurance offers rental insurance to your residents individually, or is this a blanket policy? Then you charge them along with their rent?
Anita, so it is resident liability insurance. I just want to make sure that is very clear. We basically have we've stood up an insurance company, and I believe the answer is that it is a individual policy that has a limit on it. I'm not 100% sure the answer to that question, but I think the answer is it's individual. In other words, we didn't go out and insure all 14 or 15,000 homes day one. We're doing it one at a time, or allowing them to do it one at a time.
Then for sure it's individual. All right. Are you still staying away from doing turnovers in house?
Yeah, good question, Dave. Dave's obviously been on one of our webinars or podcasts before, and the way we've always thought about this business, and make sure like you get in some questions just an aside before I answer Dave's, make sure you pop questions in the Q&A section. So we think about work orders in two buckets. One is the 2 to 4 hour work order when a resident is in a home. Those are like the typical work orders. We do most of those or some percentage of those with W-2 Evernest employees. And so we have maintenance technicians that are out riding around. In the past, what we've done on the turn work, we've never really been really good at that. And so we've contracted that out and allowed third parties to do that on our behalf, and us act more as a contractor than physically having a W-2 team member do work. The only caveat to that is that we still, in case we like need some overflow work, like somebody to make sure they're getting their hours, they will go work on a turn house. But Dave, our perception of that, or the way we think about that, has not changed. And we still think we're great at the 2 to 4 hour work order. That's really a utilization game, and we're not great at the 2 to 4 week work orders.
All right, Thomas has a question. How did you stand up the insurance company? I'm a part of a collaborative, but it seems like there's a way to have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, so we actually partnered with an insurance company to stand up an insurance company. Thomas, if you want more information on this, I'm happy to jump in and introduce you to our Chief Revenue Officer, Steve Brown, who's actually running point on this. He can actually answer the question about the individually. I think the answer is yes, we are individual. But one of the things I would want to make sure, Thomas, is that it does require some liquidity, because in the event you have to pay out this money, super important to have the capital to be able to do that. So just make sure that that's the case. Not saying it's not, just something to think about. The other thing you want is the whole idea of insurance is basically spreading risk across whether it's people or properties or whatever. And so you want to make sure you have a big enough portfolio that you're able to spread that risk. Once you start to take the risk yourself, in other words, the bigger our portfolio gets, the less risky it becomes because it becomes much more predictable. And what we've heard about on a loss ratio on that resident insurance is somewhere around 10 to 30%, just depending. And so it could be a very good business. frankly. But there is a chance that it could be 80% or 100%. Anytime you get into the insurance business, it's a little bit risky.
All right, Dave says, good to know, agreed, and had similar experience. Do you have techs that prefer not to do service calls and stick to easy turn projects? That's my issue with one tech right now.
Don't know the answer to that question if we currently have a tech, but we are basically very adamant with our teams about saying, hey, we're only doing 2 to 4 hour work orders unless you run out of work orders, and then you can work on a reno. My experience has been that people that like to work on turns, they probably don't like people. And so that's obviously hard when there's only a 2 to 4 hour work order, or they want to relax and do their own thing. And the only way to make money in that business is to hit budgets, which includes time. And if you don't hit the time budget, then it just becomes really expensive and you can lose a lot of money. Look, if you can manage, Dave, if you can manage that tech really tightly, then then certainly if you can make money doing it, I think it's great. We've just never found a way to do that at scale.
All right. That's all the questions. Do y'all have any more questions? If you have them, get them in the Q&A section. Matthew, if you're going to wrap this up, what would you, because we're a little bit early, but we got about 12 minutes.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think we need to just hit our hour and waste everybody's time. But yeah, look, if I was going to wrap this up and put a bow on it, the key thing here is to basically look at your clients, look at your residents as a relationship. And when you look at them as a relationship, you start to realize that they're in need of more things. And a lot of those are things that you can provide them either free, or you can provide it to them very cheaply that can make it a great deal for you and make it a great deal for them. And so take a step back from your portfolio and think about it more like a business owner, and think about lifetime value of a client. That's what this is all about, is like expanding the lifetime value of that client and that customer. One more question just popped in. What percentage of management fee to ancillary fees are you seeing? 50-50, 10-90? Do not know the answer to that.
You include maintenance with that.
Yeah, if you include maintenance, it's probably closer to 50-50. I was going to say, if you're just talking about like ancillary fees and management fees, my guess is it's probably more like the management fee, the traditional management fees, which I would call leasing fee and management fees, more like 80% of it. And then maybe 20% is like any kind of ancillary fees. But I honestly don't know the answer. And that's changing as we continue to add on more and more services. We would like that to be obviously a bigger number when we do that. What we think about is revenue per unit. A lot of things, you can look at that on an annual basis, or you can look at that on a monthly basis. You'll hear the industry say MRPU, monthly revenue per unit. That's like a software term, or similar to a software term. And so we want to continue to grow the monthly revenue per unit, and then also think about the economics on the back end of what is our gross margin on each one of those monthly revenues. Yes, Jason, do we include the maintenance revenue in the revenue per unit? Absolutely. The reason we do that, now we look at it different, like we'll slice it down and say, hey, here's our property management fee per unit. Here's our property management revenue. Here's our maintenance revenue. Here's our ancillary revenue. We actually do look at those numbers. But the reason you look at maintenance revenue per unit is because it is a highly reoccurring business. And so you want to definitely include that. There are some chunky pieces, like we found seasonality does play some in the maintenance and renovation. Obviously, if you're renovating houses, you're doing that more in the summer when everybody's turning, but you definitely want to look at it on a revenue per unit basis.
All right, Thomas has a question. You guys are the first people I've talked to that share the pet fee with the owner. What? Was that a choice to differentiate yourself?
Don't know. Like when Spencer said that, I was like, do we share that with the owner? Are you sure we do?
You talking about the pet fee?
Okay. Then clearly we do.
Unless you think I've gotten that wrong.
I think there is a possibility you got that wrong. And Todd says,
Well, hey, listen,
if you got
somebody,
it right, then we need to change our policy on
well,
it.
hold on. Somebody in sales just slacked this question literally today or yesterday and said the owner wants to know about the pet, why you keep $50 of the pet fee. And
Apparently we do.
hey, we just found some more revenue. We'll just
Yep, there you go. There you go. Todd says we got to quit doing that. So if anybody, shout out to Todd. He's kind enough to always hop on our webinars. This is definitely his area of expertise, and if you're looking for somebody that knows way more than Spencer and me, probably great thing to reach out to him. And then Deb says, who was on our maintenance webinar, by the way, pet fee versus pet rent. Yep. The pet fee is like an upfront fee. Pet rent is something that you would charge on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
Jason says, great time for a survey. Why don't you pop that survey in? Jason, you need to be running this thing instead of Spencer. We may not be able to get that in time. Oh, do you currently have Ancillary? Oh, there you go. Yeah. All right. While y'all are answering that, Dave says, besides turns and 2 to 4 hour service calls, do you handle health, Section 8, or code violation punch list, which could sometimes be a 2 to 20 hour job? If so, would your techs tackle this since it's tenant occupied units? Yes, probably, Dave. Any kind of Section 8 violations. The thing about your W-2 team members is you can control them better. And I think of that as more like an emergency thing that you need to get out there and jump on. And yeah, we would absolutely, and that's like almost like a combination of a bunch of 2 to 4 hour work orders. And so we feel like we can better judge the time on that. All right, you want to?
I'll share the results.
All right, 2 people, clearly, those were the 2 people that probably learned something here. And it looks like 93% of you have some ancillary revenue. All right, is there anything we missed, Todd, Deb? Deb, I know, will tell me if there's anything we missed. If not, last thing while they're probably chatting me right now, make sure, just a reminder about our next webinar will come November 2nd. Again, it's going to be all about property management, and it's a great time to bring your team.
Yep. Sign up for the newsletter, evernest.co/PM newsletter, and go check out the webinars page if you want to see any of the other ones, especially the one that kind of connects with this one is the maintenance one we just did. All right, everybody.
See y'all.
Have a good one.